Greetings, family and friends. Jacque Howard here. Welcome to Trenton 365. I'm coming to you from my home studio here in Trenton, New Jersey. And big shout out to the artists that you see on the walls here. The one to the far left is mine, but I usually don't like to give any credit to myself. This is Steph Rodriguez, and this is Billy M.F. Brown, also known as Roy Haynes. And he's a dynamite tattoo artist based out of Trenton, New Jersey as well. But I'm super giddy this morning because I've got a new friend, and this new friend and I have this passion for the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, I was gifted, big shout out to my man Dana, who gave me this book as a gift, A Sixers Odyssey. Now, I can't put this book down, and it's thick, and most of you guys know that I like to jump around when I do my reading, but my mind is blown about this book, how it was written, how it was put together, the ease of communication I had with the author, who's an amazing dude who I'm bringing on now, and he's my new friend. So I'm going to do that right now. Let's get Dave Rueter to come on the air and talk to me. Dave, how are you, sir?
Jacque, not too bad. How about yourself? Thanks for having me.
Man, I am fantastic. And as I told you, like during the pre-interview, your book has really brought a lot of joy to me and a lot of excitement. Not only from how it's laid out and designed. I love the Philly feel for it, the different Philadelphia 76ers logos. That to me let me know right away that this isn't some dude who just got this idea and said, oh, I'm going to write a book. No, this is someone who is a 76ers fan. And to lead into it, why don't we do a little talk about who you are?
Sure. So born and raised in a Philly area, Lower Bucks County, right across the bridge to Trenton, New Jersey there. Spent a lot of time on the New Jersey Transit, taking that train up from Trenton to Penn Station there. Love all the Philly sports teams. I forgive you, Jacque, that you're a Mets fan. Nobody's perfect. So I'm going to cut you some slack there. But I've loved all the Philly sports team, been a huge Sixers fan my whole life. I'm 36, soon to be 37. So the Dr. J, the end of that era, is a bit out of my peripheral, but the Charles Barkley, Hershey Hawkins, that was my wheelhouse. That's who I grew up with there. And ever since then, just watching Sixers games on Prism, right, with Steve Mix, Dr. Jack Ramsey. Like, as far as I knew, Dr. Jack Ramsey, that was my family doctor. That's the only doctor you needed, right? And I just been watching Sixers basketball, the Phillies, Eagles. This Philly sports has been ingrained in my life throughout my childhood and to this day.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you what, you just nailed a couple of names in there. Dr. Jack Ramsey. For those of us who remember, Dr. Jack was the smoothest dressing, alternative styled old
Absolutely.
head there was.
Yep.
Even the young guys were like, what is Dr. Jack wearing? So for those of you who are into fashion, make sure you check out Dr. Jack Ramsey, NBA manager, coach. But you mentioned something interesting. You said Charles Barkley, and you said Barkley as almost a transition from Dr. J.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's a great segue and a way to look at it, because remember when Barkley was picked, when he was drafted by the Sixers, it was like, who is this guy? Like
right.
they really lied about how big he was. He was very overweight.
Right.
He was a bit obnoxious even at times. And I know there were a lot of diehard Sixers fans, like the old school Sixers fans, who were like, wait a minute, we can't go from Dr. J to this guy. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So I think what helped make the transition from Barkley to Dr. J as far as the next guy was the Moses trade. And I touched upon the Moses trade. That one stung, and I don't blame Jeff Ruland, but he was traded for Jeff Ruland. So Jeff Ruland wasn't the guy. He actually, his first stint, he only played 5 games with the Sixers and then retired, made a comeback 5 years later there. But Barkley, what I will say about Barkley is that he cared, right? At the end of the day, that's what Philadelphia fans want. They want someone who cares. And Barkley's a lot of things. He's outspoken. He can be obnoxious at times, but no one ever could say that Charles Barkley didn't care. And I think whatever sort of reservations maybe fans had about him being the next guy to kind of carry that Sixers mantle, I think his play, I think his attitude, and to be honest, the fact that he hated the Celtics, check. He wasn't afraid to yell at the referees, check. I mean, it was basically like me out there. Like, I hate Larry Bird too. I think that was a terrible call, right? And you combined with him and Rick Mahorn, the thump and bump. I mean, they had an attitude about that, right? And I made this joke in the book there. In the perfect world, a Sixers team wins, but if we had our druthers, they also kick someone's But in the process there, so between Barkley and Mahorn there, I think it was an easy transition for us. Maybe we had some reservations at first, but it didn't take long for the Sixers and the city to fall in love with them.
Absolutely. And I think that when you talk about the thump and bump, it kind of, and I know I'm a little older than you, but that reminds me of the Detroit Bad Boys.
Yeah.
It was almost like they were the newer version of the
Right.
Detroit Bad Boys. You had mentioned of Hershey Hawkins, and I want to talk about Hershey because, again, he was probably someone who didn't get enough credit for who he was, how good he was, and how consistent he was. But in addition to that, I think in this day and age, the dude was a real gentleman, a complete, total gentleman. Can you talk about Hershey?
So Hershey Hawkins, it's funny. I even say this, Hershey Hawkins is way too good for this book. This book is a bit more of the forgotten players, the random players. Hershey Hawkins legitimately is maybe the best player in this book, but I included him, as you said there, Jacque, is in the world of Twitter nowadays, Hershey Hawkins would be loved. In today's NBA, the three-point shooting, spreading the floor, Hershey Hawkins would be averaging 27 points a game in his sleep.
Yep.
But in 1991, there was no Twitter. There was no Facebook. It's Barkley's team. So I think he was always kind of that second fiddle behind Barkley, but Hershey Hawkins, he could play. He went to Bradley University in Illinois, and he was dropping 40 a game. Like, it was like, no, he wasn't even breaking a sweat. Like, people from like Evansville and Indiana State and the Missouri Valley Conference, they couldn't cover Hershey Hawkins. Like, you need to have the whole town to try to slow down Hershey. So he was certainly filling it up there. And to me, as you know, that's when I was really coming in as a Sixers fan. What an easy guy to root for. This nice guy who could shoot. Like, that's it. It was perfect. And I love Hershey Hawkins. I loved his name, the nickname, the Hershey Hawkins there. And we had this big moment in Game 5 of the first round series against the Cleveland Cavaliers. He dropped about 38 points. If that happened today, if there was any Sixers athlete who dropped 40 points in a decisive Game 7, we'd build a statue in his honor. But like Hershey Hawkins, just was like pre-social media. It just kind of got swept under the rug. So while I admit Hershey is way too good for this book, I think I had to include him for people that are younger than me. They probably don't know about Hershey, but they should check out his YouTube highlights because, I mean, the guy would be a legend in today's NBA.
Absolutely, and I agree with you 100%. And it's just timing. He was born at the wrong time because, again, especially for his size too, he would be pretty much a better Seth Curry.
Right,
Seth Curry rather.
Just come a pick and roll up top, park him in the corner. He's just shooting. Everyone in the NBA today, it's if you don't shoot, you're probably not going to stick around that long. Every positions 1 through 5. Hershey Hawkins would be having a field day with this up-tempo offense there. So he was an easy inclusion in this book, even though when I published it, someone goes, "Oh, you put Hawkins in there? He's too good." I go, "Yeah, but I don't think people really realize how good he was." And Jacque, by the way, he made one All-Star team in 1991. I like to scour eBay for any sort of Sixers merchandise there, like Sixers cufflinks. I mean, anything, the most random things of all time there. I cannot find a 1991 Hershey Hawkins All-Star jersey. I don't think it exists. It's like the Loch Ness Monster. It's like Bigfoot there, Jacque. So it's just like, I don't even know if Hershey Hawkins owns a 1991 All-Star jersey. That's how rare it is there, but that's another topic for another day. But I'm always on the lookout, like once every 3 months. But let me just check it. Let me just Google, see if anything pops up.
Well, I'll tell you what. If you want to do a story about that and share about it, I'm there with you. I would love to find that. You may be one of the only jerseys that may be only a one of a kind. It may be in like the All-Star Games manager's locker room or something. Like he may have it in his office or whatever.
I mentioned this. When someone asked me about the book a couple months ago, I said, kind of the impetus about this book there is, let's say you walked into a Sixers game or Xfinity Live or a tailgate, and there's 20 people wearing an Allen Iverson jersey, and there's one person wearing a Dana Barris jersey. Who's going to have the better stories? Right? Like, who are you gravitating towards? And that's why I'm like, if I ever show up at the Wells Fargo Center in that 91 All-Star Hershey Hawkins jersey, everyone's buying me drinks. Everyone wants to take a picture with me.
On you and everything.
Right, exactly.
Hawkins jersey on.
Exactly.
we could be here forever going through like your book, A Sixers Odyssey, exploring the forgotten players of the 76ers yesterday. But I want to make sure yesteryear. I'm sorry. I want to make sure that there's a few that we touch on.
Yep.
So I got to go to my local guy. I'm from Trenton. Greg Grant.
Yeah.
Greg Grant. Why don't you open up and just talk about Greg Grant?
Greg Grant could play. Let's start there. Now you could probably fact check me here, but Division III, Trenton State, I think it's Division III. Now it's the College of Rowan. Is that right?
College of New Jersey.
College of New Jersey.
You're doing good.
College of New Jersey there. 5'8" players who play Division III basketball don't make the NBA, right? You have to really, really, really be able to play. The fact that he even made the NBA as a starting point is an unbelievable accomplishment. The fact that he stuck around for 6 years, Greg Grant was legit, right? And to me, this book is about kind of these forgotten players. If I grew up in the Barkley years and the Hershey Hawkins year, the first player that I gravitated to that wasn't a quote unquote star was Greg Grant. What's there not to love? A guy from Trenton. I was the guy, if you remember this, the New Jersey Network, NJN Network there.
Yeah.
I used to watch Trenton State games used to air because I would just watch anything basketball. I just watched all sports as a kid all day. Seton Hall games used to air on that network. Shout out to Terry DeHare, if you remember him from back in the day there. But I remember like watching Trenton State games and then the Sixers signing this guy from Trenton State who was 5'8", a short guy, and I was like the short kid. What was there not to love there? And I remember his first game as a rookie, and I kind of started his this chapter, his essay about that. He was playing in a summer league game. Nowadays, summer league games are on ESPN, but back then, no one even knew about it. There were no cameras, there were no reporters. And it just casually mentioned that Greg Grant, in one of his first summer league games as a rookie, got his first 2 shots blocked, and then he dropped 50. And I think, like, well, how great is that? And it's like this Division III player, like 5'8", probably wondering, like, do I belong here? Gets his first 2 shots blocked. And he's like, yeah, I'm just going to hang 50 on him. And to me, there was no better way to open that story is Greg Grant could play. And it's just a shame that for these the more diminutive guys there, he probably unfortunately takes a back seat to Muggsy Bogues, who was on the very popular Hornets team, and Spud Webb was in some dunk contests. But Grant was legit. And he was an easy inclusion in this book, no doubt about it.
And, on a personal level, he is a really nice human being.
Right.
He's always trying to do things and trying to help people. He's always easily approachable. I mean, of course, in this region, in the Trenton City, I mean, he's like a superstar.
Right.
But absolutely. He's always willing to, assist, run camps, all those kinds of things that you want a professional athlete to come back and do in their local community. I want to transition and talk about some scorers that spent time in Philly. One of which is Willie Burton.
Love him.
Come on, talk to me about Willie.
It's funny, Jacque, of all the players that people have commented on about this book, and there's 76. There's 76 players. I'm not exaggerating. 85% go Willie Burton. I remember that game, or I was at that game, or I watched that game with my dad. And it's funny, when I first wrote this first draft, I probably ended up writing about 5 drafts in total. I sent a couple chapters to a friend of mine who's a copywriter, kind of works in that writing world there. And the Willie Burton chapter that I had originally included there didn't have any of my personal memories, meaning me vividly watching that game with my brother and my dad, falling asleep on the recliner, waking up every 20 minutes because I'm screaming, Willie Burton, baby, you can't stop Willie Burton. And my dad like waking up startled from his recliner, like, who's Willie Burton? I'm like, I don't have time for this right now. But everybody reached out to Willie Burton. But in my first draft, I didn't mention these personal stories. And I remember the feedback I got there is, well, if you remember Willie Burton, why don't you talk about your memories of him? And I think that's something that really hit close to home there, because all the feedback I've gotten is, I remember that game. I remember Willie Burton dropping 50. I remember where I was there. And I realized when I got that feedback and I started kind of putting some personal memories of myself, watching these games and watching these players, that's what's resonating with the readers, right? It's not so much Willie Burton. He played at Minnesota. He spent some time with the Miami Heat. It was, man, I remember being 15 years old or 20 years old or 10 years old watching that game. But Burton, he was another guy. He came right in and he just filled it up. Yep. I don't think that Willie Burton was John Stockton. I don't think Willie Burton was giving up the ball, but he got that ball in the wing and he's going right to the hoop and he could go. And it was crazy, Jacque, is that he didn't play in the NBA the next year. He got more money apparently to play in Italy, and he did not play in the NBA. The Sixers did not re-sign him. No other NBA team signed Willie Burton. He actually played a couple of years in Europe. I think he came back about, I'm going to say like 1998, had a cup of coffee with the Spurs, but that was it. And it was like just crazy where it's like just like lightning in a bottle. He was playing his former team, the Miami Heat. He probably held a grudge against them. The Miami Heat beat the Knicks the night before for the first win ever at Madison Square Garden. Right, Jacque? We've all been out in New York City. Yep. Maybe that champagne was flowing. Maybe we got a couple steaks. And you take that train down to Philadelphia. Maybe you're not 100% there, but it was a perfect storm. And Willie, he hung 53 on him.
Wow. So when we were going through writing the book, I'm speaking with Dave Rueter of A Sixers Odyssey for you guys. I encourage you to get this book. And again, this is something that you're going to go back to, and you're going to be like, oh wow, let me just get into this. And you touch on a few different things, because I think I want to back up and say, like, knowing that you're a Sixers fan, you touch on some things that I think only Sixers fans would get, like even the nicknames,
right?
And the naming that you put with the chapters. I don't want to get into like the research portion of it, but was this just something that was inside you and it just started coming out as you were writing, and the names would come up and you'd be like, oh yeah, was it something like that?
I think I like the consistency of naming every chapter the something, right? It's like a uniform look there. But I think kind of the idea for all Jacque there is, right, you're a Mets fan. And if you went to a bookstore, you probably see a bunch of books on the 86 team, right? Tom Seaver, Doc Gooden. Yep. But your only memories aren't just of Doc Gooden and Darryl Strawberry. I'm sure you can recall specific bats by Benny Agbayani.
Yes.
Right. And to me, Jacque, that was this huge gap that was untapped. Right. And I can safely say that Sixers Odyssey, there's no other sports book like that, because all these books focus on the championship team or the best players or the Hall of Fame players. Well, the Sixers haven't won a championship in my lifetime. Give me 3 months and I will get one this year, but they haven't won a championship in my lifetime. I was born in 84, and I thought, man, there is such a huge untapped market there, because you can be fans of teams that don't win the championship. I'm used to it. I live it every year of my life. And I thought just having this book where I'm filling in the gaps between Iverson and Barkley, between Iverson and Iguodala and Joel Embiid there, all these players that we still watched every night because that was our team, right? Like, and I say this in the book I love Charles Barkley, but when he went to the Suns, Charles Barkley wasn't dead to me, but he wasn't my favorite player anymore.
Exactly.
Dana Barros, Jeff Hornacek, come on up, right? Like, next man up. Hershey Hawkins and Clarence Weatherspoon was certainly my guy there. And to me, I thought this book could maybe capture that. There is, your memories aren't just of the 86 Mets. It isn't just of Doc Gooden. It's all those players and all those teams. And that's where I thought I had something there.
Man, and you do. Man, I can't stop smiling. It's awesome because it's one of those books where literally you don't feel as though I got to start in any place. You can just kind of flip through and be like, right. oh, okay, well, damn, I remember him. Let me see what Dave's talking about. And then we're like, dude, all right, let me read another one.
Right.
And it's great. You wrote this book in pretty much a year.
Yep.
Talk about that process, because I know 2020 has been crazy for a lot of folks, but for you to bang this book out, the quality that's in here, how it's done, and to have it, published and distributed, that's pretty awesome.
Well, I stopped like moving, exercising, walking around for 8 months. I basically just, I would work, I would take care of my son, and then when my wife and I put him to bed, I would just come back to this desk and just not move for about, I think I lost feeling in my legs like in May, another time in July and September. But basically I used to write for a Sixers site called Liberty Ballers. It's affiliated with SB Nation there. I used to have a blog way back in the day there where I would, when I was trying to find a niche, that was kind of my opening. Whereas originally I was writing about the current sports landscape, Jacque, but there were so many great, terrific blogs out there that I couldn't really find a footing. So one day I just said, I'm going to mix it up. And I wrote about Charles Shackelford. Charles Shackelford is in this book, was the very first essay I ever wrote. I wrote it in 2008. So about 12 and a half years after the fact there, he finally was able to get it published here. But then I stopped writing about 2015, right? Life gets in the way, right? Work, all these personal obligations there. But when the pandemic first started happening in late March here, it was kind of a bit of a rut, right? Because it's just like this NBA season got canceled, the baseball season got canceled there. So it's like I would come home at night and watch sports. I would watch the Phillies every night. I'd watch the Sixers, but like nothing's on TV. You know, my wife and I are watching like season 12 of Gossip Girl on Netflix, and I'm like, there must be more. There must be more than this. And Jacque, honest to God, I was walking my dog one night. I was walking around the block, and I'm certainly known to have a deep relationship with my dog where I will have conversations with him. He's more of a listener. Jacque, he doesn't really talk back there. But I was walking my dog, and I was like, I should write that book. And I said it out loud. And Rupert, my dog, didn't acknowledge it, but I took like his silence as yeah, you should, Dave. You should write this book. And I got back from that walk, and I went through my laptop, and I was trying to find old Word documents of essays that I wrote. I was trying to track down my old blog to see if I could find original essays on Charles Shackelford. Warren Kidd was one of the first ones there. Kevin Ollie I did years ago. And I put those together there. And then the next morning I was just like, who would I be excited to write about? Who would I be excited to write about there where I can kind of maybe see if I can build some momentum? And I wrote about Jeff Rueland, and more specifically, Jacque, when he got ran over by a luggage cart outside the Boston Celtics arena, which, by the way, if that happened today, if that happened with Joel Embiid, we'd be riding. Jacque, I'd be on that first bus, that first Greyhound up to Boston, ready to raise hell there. And I wrote about Jeff Rueland, and I thought it was a really fun, well, not that fun for Jeff, but an interesting story where younger Sixers fans probably don't realize it. And fans that are our age probably haven't thought about it in years. And what I realized, Jacque, is I liked it. I enjoyed writing it. I enjoyed writing again. I enjoyed the research of it. And one essay led to another. And then I finished the first draft in about 5 months. And then the next 3.5 months was editing, fine tuning, and all the other kind of works behind the scenes there. But yeah, it's my wife was very patient with me to put up with me, because basically from like 8 o'clock at night to 2 a.m. every night, I would just focus on this. She's like, "What are you doing down there?" I'm watching Clarence Weatherspoon YouTube highlights. Don't worry about it.
Well, I'll tell you what. That's the one thing about anyone who's, I believe, has a successful situation in a relationship. It comes from that balance. Right. And the fact that you guys know each other, and my wife's in the other room. So I hear what you're saying, and I agree fully. Right. So going forward, right, I've seen your book on the shelf of from Tyrone. Who does, on WIP. I saw the book on the shelf in his studio. So I know that there's people who are reading this book, and I know there's people who are just as excited as I am. The best way to get it is go search for you, or how should people go?
Any online retailer there. Okay. So your Barnes & Noble, your Amazon, bookshop.org supports independent bookstores. You can find it through there. So certainly any retailer online. It's not in any physical bookstores. Obviously with COVID, that was hard to kind of sell anyway, as far as getting a position to kind of promote have these books in bookstores. But any online retailer will have those. It's readily available at any store.
Awesome. Now, before we finish up, because I'm not going to let you go that easy, I'm gonna try my best to figure out what else I can extract from you, so that I can get you to come back and we can talk more later. But you do realize that I'm going to be in your back pocket asking you all these questions about the Sixers. That's great.
You know where to find me.
Yeah, my man. So let's transition and talk about, where we are right now as the Sixers. I know that you've got some thoughts about the way the team is structured and the way it's built, et cetera. And before you give your opinion, I just want to give mine. I am a huge fan of Ben Simmons. Yeah. I think that a lot of times we don't give athletes enough time to figure out what's going on, even when they are as good as they are and communicate the way that they do. We don't give them enough time to figure out who they are and to get in. And I think we've seen glimpses of it where Joel wasn't in it and Ben was able to drop some big numbers and et cetera. So I really like Ben. Joel Embiid is the MVP. I don't care what anyone says. He's the MVP for what he's doing. The way the Sixers go when he's there, it's the whole package. I'm also a big fan of Tobias because I think that he is that third piece. Again, I think that he's probably I know he's from New York, but I think he seems like he comes from a background where Philly
Right.
Philly is a bit more, you know, blue collar, like, hey, my mom's going to slap you, then I'm going to slap you kind of thing. And I think that we have the pieces. If I could see a transaction that would help them to get over the top, I would really like to see Kyle Lowry come, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not willing to give up on Matisse Thybulle. Um, as far as Danny Green, Maxey, I mean, I'd be okay with that, but I
Right.
don't want to move Matisse. And I do think we do need to add one more piece. Your
Right.
thoughts?
Yeah. I think Morey has done a great job as far as really restructuring the roster in just 1 year.
Yep.
Last year, that roster was just doomed to fail, right? Square pegs in a round hole. He's basically realizing when you have a player like Ben Simmons who's so unique, and I think what kind of frustrates me, I don't really engage in as far as social media, as far as, oh, I can't believe you said X, Y, and Z. I think I'm just, I'm more just kind of watching, complaining to myself, right, internally there. But I think with Ben Simmons, people focus on that he can't shoot, but you're ignoring the fact that he's a top 5 defensive player. He's a 6'10" point guard with incredible vision. He can defend positions 1 through 5 and defend them well. Whereas let's try to build around that and bring pieces in that work with that, as opposed to just saying, oh, he can't shoot. Would I love him to shoot 2 threes a year or 2 threes a game? Pardon me. Absolutely. But I can't physically make him do that there. But with that being said, he's a terrific player. Joel Embiid is absolutely the MVP there. I think with their talent right now, I think they can get to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think guys like Seth Curry. I think Tobias Harris is another player where I think people focus on his contract, but not for the fact that he's still a pretty good player. Is he overpaid? Probably. Is he still very talented? Absolutely. I don't know if we can get by Brooklyn when they're healthy. As far as Kyrie, Durant, Harden, they're a real problem. But with that being said, there is no one on that roster that can defend Embiid. Nobody that can defend Embiid. Will they be sweeping us? Absolutely not. I agree. I would love Lowry. And I love Lowry, right? He's from North Philly. And I hate watching Lowry on Toronto. He drives me crazy. I feel like he's always flopping. He's always grabbing, and the refs never call it. And he's always incredulous when he gets called for a foul. But it's almost like Deion Sanders in his prime. I hated Deion, but if he was on the Eagles, I'd be getting his jersey so fast. And to me, Kyle Lowry is a great example there. It's funny when they talk about, you say you don't want to trade Matisse, but you would trade Maxey. Whereas in November, that was probably flipped because Maxey came off like a house of fire and Matisse was kind of not getting much playing time. But now Matisse is starting to flip there. So it's hard to see with these young players on who's really going to pan out or who's really going to develop there. But I would, because, gosh, I don't know if you ever get a better year out of Embiid than you're seeing right now.
I think Dave Rueter, I think that's a perfect way to end up talking about our Sixers. We don't know if we would get a better year out of our big man, Joel Embiid.
So let's go for it.
Spot on. Folks, you've been listening and watching the Trenton 365 show, and I got a chance to sit down and chat with Dave Rueter, who is the author of A Sixers Odyssey. I'm going to be talking about this book for quite some time, and just make sure that you reach out to him. I'm going to be sharing his information as well, and I'm going to have Dave come back as I continue to go through the book and talk about what's going on with the Sixers. You sound good with that, Dave? Absolutely.
We'd love to be here.
My man, thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate you. Give your spouse my best as well.
Thanks, Jacque.
That's all right. Folks, you've been listening and watching the Trenton 365. Shout out to WIMG 1300 and WPHY. And remember, folks, it's always about justice, peace, and humility.